Hi, my name is Jalen Bate. I'm a conductor, and here are the dots and lines on my desk this week. Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. The first thing to know about this piece is that it exists in many different forms. The Firebird is originally a full-length ballet written in 1910, which is fairly early on in Stravinsky's career. A suite in music is just a compilation of different pieces, different movements from a larger work like a ballet or an opera that are generally the favorites or the most memorable ones that a composer or publisher feels can be performed as one work in a concert setting. There are three different versions of this piece, the original from 1910 as well as versions from 1919 and 1945. Each of them is a little bit different than the last in terms of length, instrumentation, form, all these things. And there are lots of different reasons for that. Some of it has to do with money, so that Stravinsky could collect more money from publishing different versions of it. Some were for playability, some were for feasibility. Lots of things go into actually getting printed music out there for the rest of the world to play over and over again. I'm working from the 1919 version, which is the most popular and most frequently played version, and you'll notice that I have a fresh, new, crisp score that I'm marking up from Calmus. Stravinsky's music is famously complicated, harmonically, melodically, and especially rhythmically. You'll often hear in music history class people refer to Stravinsky as liberating the bar line, and by that they mean creating rhythms that don't necessarily rely on downbeats every single time to be understood. Rhythms that have an inherent logic in them that don't rely on always coming down on beat one of every subsequent bar. Sometimes that's done through syncopation, sometimes it's done through overlaying many different rhythms onto one another to create this wonderful messy soup that is both very complicated but also very satisfying to listen to and sort your way through as a musician and a conductor. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's a conductor's job to understand and to be able to decipher every single dot and line on the page. That includes very complicated and complex rhythms. A great way to get into the music of Stravinsky and his contemporaries like Richard Strauss, Benjamin Britten, and lots of different people from the early 20th century is to try and zoom out. You may have heard the saying, can't see the forest through the trees, and this really applies to the movement that I'm studying here, Variations of the Firebird, from pretty early on in the suite. This whole thing is in 6/8, which is fundamentally felt in two, 6/8 notes in a bar, grouped into two groups of three. Now this is different than 3/4 time, which is still 6/8 notes in the bar, but is instead grouped into three groups of two. Stravinsky likes to pit these two layers against each other on top of some crazy woodwind writing, on top of the violins not playing 8th note pulses, but instead breaking them into 16th note pairs just to make it a bit more complicated. As I prepare, I spend a lot of time thinking about what the core musical message is that Stravinsky wanted to communicate here. I want to ensure that every movement, every gesture I give on the podium is with purpose and has a reason behind it, and that I'm not getting too distracted with all this crazy ornamentation. Of course, that doesn't mean we're supposed to ignore the crazy stuff or the ornamentation, because that's also part of the music. But that's the frustration of being a conductor, and also the fun, figuring out how much of each element of music you want to show at any given time. I try and think of it like cooking. Everything on the plate is important, but you have to ensure that your big elements, like your protein, your vegetables, whatever, are prepared correctly and the way you want them to be before you worry about plating and garnishes. Musically, that means zooming out to see the big picture rhythmically, and then zooming back in to get all those little details that really make it pop and shine. This has been Dots and Lines on a Page.